Background history. Hanoi Quarter is one of the oldest and constantly developed areas in Vietnam. It has been the soul of the city for nearly 2,000 years. Crafts, shops, and business were formed there during the Lý Dynasty. When Lý Thái Tổ decided to move the citadel from Huế to Hanoi by the end of the 17th century, this area has developed into a bustling and beautiful shopping malls on the banks of the Red River. The area, which includes Hang Buom, Hang Ngang, Hang Dao, was famous for Chinese immigration. It was the most populated place for Chinese to live, trade in the Nguyen dynasty. Immigration history. From the Lê dynasty, Chinese from Guangdong and overseas Vietnamese who came back from China chose Hang Ngang to be a place for business and accommodations. As time progressed, more and more foreigners who are mostly Chinese start to come and work there. At that time, Hang Ngang name was changed to Viet Dong. In the 17th century, when the Qing dynasty took over China, Ming's people abandoned their country and moved to certain places in Vietnam. Hang Ngang took in a major wave of Chinese immigration. They brought Chinese culture and merged it into Vietnamese culture, bringing great diversity to the street. Hang Buom, located on To Lic River bank, was a shopping center of fishing too. But in the 19th century, the population of Chinese in Hang Ngang started to expand, as well as their business. Hang Buom became the second Hang Ngang. Hang Dao was one of the most affluent places in Hanoi, famous for silk and silk dyeing, tailor, and clothes retail. The street was narrow, but still it was the biggest place for trade among big markets of old Hanoi, including Hang Ngang. Colonization history. At the end of the 19th century, Vietnam was colonized by the French. French took over the government and made changes across the country for management purposes. Under French colonial rule from 1883 to 1945 and the First Indochina War, Hanoi Old Quarter underwent a massive spatial and occupational change. The name of the streets were changed, trams were added to the street, sidewalks were narrow, architecture slowly changed from the traditional Vietnamese to French style, and most buildings were painted in a distinct yellow color. During wartime, Hang Buom was nominated to be a battle-free area by both sides. As a result, the economy and business here was not affected. The street remained the most affluent places in Hanoi, and also the French Resistance Commission was found on this street.
Hanoi Old Quarter is located to the east of the Old Citadel, to the north of the French Quarter, and to the west of the Red River banks. Hang Buom, Hang Dao, and Hang Ngang streets lie at the south end of the area, right next to Hoàn Kiếm Lakes. The busy life of Old Quarter still goes on inside the narrow long alleys of Hang Dao and Hang Buom. Even the most famous restaurants or shops might be located deep inside the densely populated blocks. Hang Dao and Hang Buom really preserve the hustle and bustle of the former Chinatown. The vibrant night markets also attract many visitors every weekend. Most shop houses have 2 floors. These narrow houses are only about 4 meters wide and 15 to 40 meters long. The first floor is used as business shops or for rent, and nearly all household activities are on the second and third. For this assignment, we chose shop houses from 17 to 48 Hang Ngang Street. Most of the shops here sell clothes, which exemplify the characters of the 36 Guild Streets under the name of the Old Quarter. Other types of shops include supermarket, accessories, tailor, tea coffee house, cosmetics, a police office, and a memorial house. Standing between new houses and shops are ones that still carry architectural signifiers of French and Chinese. Once a Chinatown, many buildings on the streets are influenced by Southern Chinese shop house style, with elements like low walls and ceramic air vents on second floor, as well as some Western elements such as the arches and central keystone. Clothing stores take up an overwhelming 61.5% on Hang Ngang Street, followed by tailor and cosmetics, and out of 31 houses documented, 11 still have old architectural elements attributed to Chinese and French, some over 80 years old. The colors in these street photos represent types of shops documented from our site visit. Due to COVID, some shop houses on the street closed and had their signboards taken down. The French during the rebuild of Hanoi found out that the color yellow really suits the humid climate of Vietnam. Therefore, the paint color yellow is prominent on the street, as well as many other in the Old Quarter, serving as signs of colonial architecture and nostalgic aesthetics. The 17th century saw the first remarkable wave of Chinese immigrants to Thăng Long. During the fall of the Ming Dynasty in China, a great number of people from Guangdong and Fujian provinces also migrated when China's war with Japan broke out in 1937 and after the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949. During the early Lei Dynasty in the 15th and 16th century, a large number of Chinese immigrants gathered in Thăng Long and quickly thrived. Hang Ngang and Hang Buom Street quickly became busy and bustling Chinatowns. However, the number of Chinese dwindled rapidly after the end of the Vietnam War. Nowadays, there are few Chinese business owners in these streets, and the Chinese marks on the place are still present, but mostly lost or changed. Two important architectural relics remaining today on Hang Buom Street are Wan Yu Temple and Cantonese Assembly Hall. The Assembly Hall was an important cultural center of the Chinese community from Guangdong province. It was built in the shape of the word mouth or nation in Chinese language, consisting of enclosed perpendicular blocks to form an open space in the middle. In 1888, France began to rebuild Hanoi, attracting more people to migrate to the area. Construction of the first shop houses built in French architectural style in the Old Quarter commenced in the early 1920s. The transformation in streetscape did not eliminate all Vietnamese elements, but gave them a charming and harmonious mix with the West. Besides Art Deco, the Indochina style were also introduced in French shop houses in Hang Ngang and Hang Dao Street. These houses often have lavish decoration plastered on gables and facade predominantly in yellow and orange colors. Flower motif ornaments and moldings can be found around windows and above doors, along with Ionic or Corinthian columns. Some other French shop houses often have the owner's name written on the facade, dating from the 20s or 40s. These characters are Vietnamese if the owner is Vietnamese, or Chinese if the owner is Chinese. These letters are either painted or made of concrete. An example of the Art Deco architecture is a building on 48 Hang Ngang Street. The place was originally a silk and fabric shop, rebuilt in the Art Deco style when it was first introduced in Vietnam in the 1930s, which can be identified by geometric decorations and hanging concrete slabs on the roof. It was where President Ho Chi Minh worked during the 1945 August Revolution and the birthplace of the Declaration of Independence document.
The Old Quarter in my mind has always been the best masterpiece of art. It's always gorgeous but also confusing, and the three streets Hang Dao, Hang Ngang, Hang Buom represent the best of it. A tall and short old buildings all standing next to one another, old Western and Eastern architecture crashing into each other. The narrow streets, which are so narrow two people couldn't fit in. Rich families living in like 3 meters, 5 meters square of land, mossy yellow walls with advertisement painted or glued all over them. But what makes the area so interesting is the people who work and live there. They come from many places across the country. They have multiple stories, backgrounds, and with such diversity, Hang Dao, Hang Ngang, Hang Buom are always chaotic and crowded, but in their own way.
I have always thought that Hanoi's Old Quarter is so small and at the same time so big. So small that two people cannot even pass each other in its tiny alleys. So small that some houses are stretched thin like rubber, and yet so big that even the oldest Hanoians cannot be sure to have seen and tried everything about the place. The three Hang Dao, Hang Ngang, and Hang Buom streets act as an entrance into the Old Quarter, a portal to go back in time. Inside the overcrowded blocks there is a faint damp smell from the tall walls, malls, dimly lit by light bulbs running along the length of mysterious narrow alleys. That is the scent of old Hanoi.